हराने के लिए आगे बढ़ते जा रहे हैं। प्रत्येक दिव्यास्त्र को उचित दिव्यास्त्र से रोका जा सकता है, लेकिन उनका चयन योद्धाओं की बुद्धि पर निर्भर है। कुरुक्षेत्र के इस युद्ध में क्या आप जीवित बच सकते हैं, इसका निर्णय भाग्य और योद्धाओं के कौशल के हवाले है। जानिए, आपको मिलती है वीरगति या बनते हैं सम्राट युधिष्ठिर के राज्य का हिस्सा। खेलिए महाभारत युद्ध पर आधारित यह रोचक खेल, रणभूमि कुरुक्षेत्र।
नमस्ते रंजीत जी।
नमस्ते।
So welcome back to Kahi Suni. Through all the audience members who have joined and who are seeing Ranjit here. So this is Ranjit's second appearance on Kahi Suni. Last time we saw Ranjit, we were talking about his story Shandilya Duhita in the book called Arya. And this is Ranjit's first full-length novel. And congratulations, Ranjit. The book has turned out really well. I really enjoyed reading it. I think I was the first person to send you a review of the book. So
Yes.
So I really loved it. The moment I picked the book, and despite having difficulties to find time, I finished it in 3 sittings. So that means the book was engaging enough.
Okay.
And I really like the way it has turned out. You have captured the entire story of Bhagwan Parashuram. I think it's not the entire story, it's just the part one of the story. There are more parts to come.
Yeah.
And the book is seeing good response also, as I see, right? It has gone for the second print. So congratulations for that. So can we call it bestseller already, or?
I'm yet to get the time, but
Okay.
we're getting there fast.
I think you will get there. If not already, you would get there soon enough, because the book is receiving good. And everywhere, whoever I have presented the book, they have also given good response.
Yeah.
So congratulations once again. So everyone, here we are to talk about the book called Rama of the Axe. From the name, you can understand this is the story of Bhagwan Parashuram. And Bhagwan Parashuram's story is very important if you want to understand our history, ancient history. Some people call it mythology, but let's not get into the nomenclature.
Yeah.
Parashuram is a very important character also in our epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata both. So he features in both Ramayana as well as Mahabharata. And in Mahabharata, he has a much more prominent role than he has in Ramayana. Having said that, there is not a single source or single book which captures the entire story of Bhagwan Parashuram from beginning to end. And it is scattered across multiple places. So you can find it in our Puranic literature, you will find it in Ramayana, you will find it in Mahabharata, you will also find it in other literature as well. So there is this conversation between Bhagwan Dattatreya and Parashuram. That is also very interesting. That is something we will probably see in your book in future. Yeah. But it is important to capture that story, and I think that is the mission that Ranjit had in mind when he picked up this task. So without taking too much time in introducing, let's welcome Ranjit. So Ranjit, welcome aboard. First thing, why did you choose to write about Bhagwan Parashuram?
Okay. Namaste. Good evening to everyone. Before I answer that question, I need to thank Gauravji a lot, because when you're coming out with your first book, you look for support, you look for people who can help you out, and Gauravji has helped me out a lot. He was the one who presented the book to Vivek Debroy-ji, Sanjeev Sanyal-ji, Gautam Chikarmane-ji. It wouldn't have happened without him, because I didn't make it to Delhi. He was there. He got the copies and gave it to them personally, and I can't thank him enough for that. So Gauravji, thank you so much. You believed in the book. When I was looking around for support, you stood by my side, so I'm not going to forget that. There's much gratitude to you. Thank you for that. Coming to the story, it's while we were doing the workshop for Unsung Valor, that the idea of writing a novel, sort of came to my mind, but whether to get down to it or not was still a little bit of a, that inner self-critic keeps asking you, can you do it? Can you write an entire novel? It's only when the reviews of the story came in, the story on Shakuni, that I got a little bit more confidence. So if there are readers who are listening to this, please go ahead and review the book on whatever forum, Amazon, Goodreads. If you're running a blog, please do it. It gives a world of confidence to the writer, especially if you have good things to say. And luckily they did. So that's when I started writing. But why I chose to write on Bhagwan Parshuram was a mystery for me too, till I was like 5 or 6 chapters into the book. And so what I did was I used to write 3-4 chapters and send it to my critique readers. I had 4 or 5 critique readers of my family, and I would send it to them. And once I had sent that batch, I sat down to think of why I did this. And from 99 to 2003, there were a series of deaths in my family. It started with my father. He passed away in 99. And all the deaths were in my mother's side of the family, and ended with my father's mother's death. So this was happening every 5-6 months. There was somebody passing away, and I obviously part of the last rites because I am the eldest in both sides of the family. So there was this one particular temple that we went to on the outskirts of Trivandrum. The name of the place is Thiruvallam. It has a small Triveni Sangam there where we immerse the ashes and all that. So either for the 13th day ceremony or for the first anniversary of the passing away, when I was at that temple, I realized that this was the first time I was entering a Parashurama temple. I didn't even know that, because it's very rare. It's not as, prolific as Rama or Sri Krishna temples. And I have stayed in Trivandrum for a couple of years, and I've gone to all the major temples there. But nobody even mentioned this temple to me. So that's how the fascination with the sixth avatar started. I knew the bare bones of the story. I knew what had happened. But that's when I started reading. And perhaps it's the stories are more down south rather than up north of India, because the entire Konkan coast from Kanyakumari to Goa is supposed to have been bought out of the sea by Parashuramji. So that's called the Parashurama Kshetra. And he is also the founder of 108 Shiva temples and 108 Devi temples along this Parashurama Kshetra. And I think most people would have heard of Trishur Puram. That's, where you have a lot of elephants and all this stuff, and a whole lot of people happens in Kerala. That temple, Vadakanathan temple, is supposed to be founded by Lord Parshuram himself. So there is this, stories about Parshuram here. But up north, I don't know how many of these stories have gone there. So my reading about Bhagwan Parshuram started then. And it's been in the back of my head, in my subconscious ever since then. So when I started to write, it was like my first choice was him. I don't know why I did that. But obviously I had been reading so much that it had, there was some back of the mind that was like, let's attempt to do something like this. And I wasn't sure whether I would write the entire novel. But then we'll come to that later. This is how it started. Started years back, came out on paper only during the lockdown.
Interesting. So the point that you made about Kerala and that land being, I mean, what I don't know what word you should use, that invented, or invented would not be the word. It was like excavated or whatever. He basically reclaimed it from the sea, right? That's how the story goes. He reclaimed the land. And if you look at it, like people say Ram's story is north to south. That's what people say, and people claim that Sri Krishna and Arjun's story is very much centered around the northern region. But if you look at Bhagwan Parashuram's story, it is all over the place, like all over India. He has covered the length and breadth of the entire country. You can go to Kerala, you can go to Arunachal, you will find the significance of Bhagwan Parashuram. Like Parashuram Kund is there in Arunachal, right?
Yes.
So, and then Mahendragiri, where he
Yeah.
basically eventually went. So I mean, it's all the length and breadth of the places in India, and I think there was a boon when he donated the earth to Kashyap Rishi. The boon was that he can travel anywhere at will, and maybe
Yeah.
that made him appear at wherever he wanted. So,
Yeah.
so basically, as we talked about that in the beginning, in the introduction, I mentioned that Parashuram's story is there in Mahabharata as well as in Ramayana,
Yeah.
but that is not the part you have captured in your book. It is
Yeah.
the origin story, if I can call it that, of
Huh.
how Rama of Jamdagni Ram became Parashuram,
Yeah.
and that origin story you have tried to capture. So in your research, what sources you have referred to, and how important the research work was for you for this story?
Yeah. Okay. I depended on the Brahmanda Purana mainly for this. Different Puranas give different names to his brothers, and I didn't want to, mix and match. I thought I'll depend on one text.
Hmm.
So luckily, my uncle had a Malayalam version of this, and it was a sort of getting back in touch with my mother tongue to read it in. It was very heavily Sanskritized Malayalam that I was reading in that, and this is compiled by a very great literary figure from Kerala. He's won the Sahitya Academy, Jnanapeeth, Kittam Achyutan Nambudiri. That's his name. So I started reading that. The thing that struck me later on was that once we put something on paper and we come back to it later to edit, what some of us do is you change the font, you change the font size, you change the background, so you're not visually looking at the same thing again. So I think reading the story in a different language somehow, psychologically it hits you different. And I was glad that I was reading it in my mother tongue. It helped me get back in touch with it, and probably gave me, I don't know, insights that I wouldn't have got if I'd read it in English. That's the base that I started on. But before writing the story, when you approach a story, there is a kind of hook that gets you into the story first. And the one that snagged in my mind was, why would a son execute his mother on the orders of his father? So usually when I read it up, it's like he was a very obedient son. But there's nothing bad said about the four elder brothers of Parashurama who refused to do this, and they were executed by their dad. So how do you? Is it only obedience that mattered there? Was there something more? And sometimes when we read the Puranas, we say, this is usually the attitude is this is unbelievable, yeah, and then turn the page or something like that. But if you want to write something on it, it's places like this that you should sort of dwell on, keep coming back to it, and see if something happens. Luckily for me, that was the time that I read that this in the Puranas, though Renuka is only shown as a Rishi Patni, she is a goddess in North Karnataka.
Yeah, there are temples dedicated.
Temples, yeah. And there's a very famous temple of Renuka called Renukamba Devi temple in Saundatti in North Karnataka. She's the Kuldevi to a lot of people. So this aspect is not there in the Purana. And I didn't think that the story would be complete unless I brought this also into the story. It's only when I read up about that I got the clue to how to start with that and how to get past that point and take the story on from there. So that was how it started. Though I've taken the basic plot line from Brahmanda Purana, I have brought in a lot of folklore to try and flesh out the story and tell you what probably would have happened. We have a lot of stories about Parashurama, but hardly any literature. We don't have a Parashuramayana, we don't have a Parashurama Samhita, we don't have any of this. So we had to, sort of pick and choose, get the stories and put it in together. And I was halfway through the book when suddenly there was, this tube light went off very late. Then I said, there must be other books. There may be other people who have written the story. And what if I'm writing the same thing that they have? It's not going to be of any use. So I rushed onto Amazon and bought all the Parashurama books I could find. So then I read K.M. Munshiji's version, Vineet Agarwalji's version, and I was, happy that I was going on a different path than them. And so that was the time of greatest stress for me, because I'd finished half of what I was writing, and then I was just praying that this is not going along the lines that has already been written. Then the reader won't be interested. So luckily that didn't happen. That's how.
So, as you said, that the point where Parashuram executes his mother was the one that intrigued you, right? Normal life सब लोग जी लेते हैं, correct? Till the time no abnormalities, like edge cases are the ones. जैसे हम लोग जब IT वगैरह में टेस्टिंग वगैरह करते हैं, तो क्या बोलते हैं कि एज केसेस भी टेस्ट करने बहुत जरूरी हैं, एंड मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम वी एंड अप टेस्टिंग ओनली द एज केसेस एंड वी फॉरगेट द यूजुअल थिंग्स, बिकॉज वी बिलीव दैट यूजुअल तो होता रहता है, राइट? बट इट्स दीज एज केसेस दैट गिव यू मोर मीनिंग. जैसे धर्म संकट की जैसे लोग बात करते हैं, राइट? जब नॉर्मल लाइफ चलती है तो धर्म फॉलो करना आसान होता है. जब लाइफ में डिफिकल्टी आती है तब धर्म फॉलो करना डिफिकल्ट होता है. और तब हमको न्यूएंसेस वहां पे ज्यादा होते हैं कि भाई यहाँ पे क्या सही है क्या गलत है, ये करना सही था तो ये करना गलत होना चाहिए, बट वो भी गलत नहीं है. एज यू सेड कि उनके भाइयों के लिए भी कुछ ऐसा नहीं कहा गया, पिता की आज्ञा नहीं मानी तो मतलब दे ऑल वेंट नॉर्मल, लाइक परशुराम आस्क्ड द बून टू रिवाइव द ब्रदर्स, राइट? And in our books, scriptures, we have seen that there are always parallels of these stories. None of these stories happen only once. They always happen in pairs most of the time, so that it gives you more insights probably. And that reminds me of the story of Chirkari, where the same thing happened, but Chirkari being Chirkari, he kept thinking. So Gautam Rishi asked Chirkari to kill Ahilya. And he goes away, okay, he will kill. And then Chirkari being Chirkari, he starts thinking, and he starts figuring out all the pros and cons of the story. What will happen if I do this? If I do this, what will happen? And by the time Gautam Rishi comes, he asks him, what have you done? He said, no, I'm still thinking. So then Rishi hugs him. He said, oh, you saved me from a grave sin that I could have committed. So there are both the aspects of it, right? In the Jamdagni story, the act is done, and then later he repents, and then he basically revives his wife and the sons. And in Chirkari's story, Chirkari doesn't go through the process, and yet Gautam Rishi is happy that he actually saved him from the struggle. But in both the cases, Gautam Rishi also regrets, and Jamdagni Rishi also regrets, right? But I'm saying that both the stories give you more meaning to what is going on in these situations. And in your book, you have given it a completely different meaning. The deifying of Renuka, as you said, that is something that was very innovative. And you have already, that was one of my questions that you have already answered, that you basically drew inspiration from the folklores and the temples that are out there in Karnataka. So I would not ask that question. Moving on to the next bit.
Just one point to add to this. It's fascinating that you brought up Ahalya's story in this, because in Ahalya's story, there was a transgression. In Renuka's story, there was no transgression at all. She's merely seen something. So, so the question that came to my mind was, why such a severe punishment for something that she's not crossed the line and done something that she's not supposed to. So why would there be such a harsh punishment? So this thought also occurred to me when I was thinking about that incident and how to put it down on paper. And then when I knew about Renuka Devi is when I said, okay, now I know how to proceed with this.
That is very interesting, the way you have tried to capture that, and the beauty of that is that it doesn't come across forced. Right, because the same imagery repeats at multiple places, and this is all very contextual. So it doesn't happen just because you want it to happen. It feels like that the story demands that thing to happen again, right? So that is very beautifully done in you, and I really enjoyed it. Then comes the one of the interesting aspects was the guest appearance of Ravan. So how you went about it? Can you please enlighten us?
Okay, I mean, that story is there in the Purana. What fascinated me was that not too many people know about Karthavir Arjuna and how powerful he was. There was also this modern myth making that's going around that Ravana was the greatest devotee of Mahadeva.
Yes, that is interesting.
Every Mahadeva temple has Nandi right in front of Shiva.
Correct. Nobody
waiting
has
for him.
Ravan.
Yeah. Who's going to be a greater devotee than Nandi?
Correct.
And you're bringing Ravan to that place because something has been attributed to him. On top of that, we have Arjun, we have Parashurama who have received blessings from Mahadev and proved worthy of it. They have
Correct.
not gone the wrong path.
Correct.
And now you've made Ravan jump over all of them and put him as the prime devotee. It's unpalatable to me. I couldn't do that.
So sorry to interrupt you, Ranjit, but since you brought in Ravan, one thing I was thinking today only, and it's coincidence that I was thinking about it. That because today is Friendship Day, so I was reading a lot of Friendship Day posts, and I was thinking of Friends of the Divine. So like Sugriv is an obvious name that comes to mind. Vibhishan is there. Then you have Arjun, obviously very obvious. Sudama. Then another name comes to mind is Kuber. Kuber got the boon of friendship from Mahadev.
Yes.
Right. So if Ravan was such a great devotee of Mahadev, how come he was an enemy of Mahadev's friend?
Yeah.
Right. That thought came to my mind today morning itself. That I mean, this doesn't justify that Ravan being a great devotee of Mahadev.
True. I mean, not just Ravan. When I was writing the story, I didn't want to, play with the characters of the story that I'm writing with, warp them into something that they are not originally told. Now, if I was going to write something on the Mahabharata, I am not going to do something where, I glorify somebody who is not glorified by Vedavyasji.
Correct.
Now, he is an eyewitness to everything that happened there. We know the story because of him. If I'm going to do something like that, like what's happening nowadays with Karna and Draupadi, I'd rather not call it the Mahabharata. I'd rather call it, a medieval Game of Thrones or something like that.
Give it a different name.
Different name and do that. But it's everybody seems to be doing that now. And you have lost sight of the character
that is actually, I would call it cheating, because these people are writing books claiming the name of Mahabharata to sell the books.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're writing some random fan fiction, and then you are riding on the popularity of Mahabharata to sell the book. But in the process, you are destroying the whole premise of Mahabharata. That is the basis of your selling the book. So I would call it cheating. So most of the people who end up writing these books and claim that inspired by Mahabharata or retelling of Mahabharata, this is another thing, right? Retelling from Draupadi's perspective, retelling from XYZ's perspective. And I'm like, what is the need for retelling from XYZ's perspective? Everything is there. And if you are adding the perspective, then that perspective has to bring out the nuance. That just like Deepak has written this Blood and Iron, right? Blood and in that he is basically in Mahabharata we have seen Sanjay's version of the events.
Yeah.
Right. We don't know what Dronacharya would be thinking when he was basically let's say on 13th day's night, what he was thinking, we don't know. Right. So that could be a very good thing, good point to bring forward. But then you have to do it in a manner that Dronacharya's character is there in the book. Right. So if the book character is XYZ, you can't make your Dronacharya behave completely out of character. So bringing in new perspective is fine, but that has to be in line with the character. And that is something that very few people are doing. And I'm glad that you brought this point, because this is happening a lot, and we need to encourage people who are being true to the original source and not trying to just ride on the popularity of the original source to sell some random fan fiction, and discourage this amount of fan fiction that is being created. And in fact, in one of the calls, Kahi Suni episode only, I was talking about this that the only way to counter this is to write more books which
Yes.
are true to the source, right? So when
Yeah.
your chat GPT does its so analysis, it should
Yeah.
find more on the authentic stuff than
Yeah.
on the fan fiction. And
True.
that is a good way to bring in, I mean, our perspective, which is more closer to the original source rather than some random imagination of ours.
True, and I think we should also leave this idea that unless you change something, you're just basically copy pasting the original story. There are a lot of nuances that you can
Correct.
find in the original story itself if you spend some time with it. If you instead before you start retelling, it would be a good idea to reread,
Correct.
not just read it once and then start writing. Reread it 2 3 times. I'm sure there is a different shade of meaning, a different nuance that will come to you, and maybe that will give you an idea or a germ of an idea to start writing
Correct.
on something. So coming back to Ravan, I had to include him in that because he's they're trying to make him out to be this all powerful guy, and most probably say that he laid down his life in front of Sri Rama. Sri Rama didn't actually defeat him. He wanted. I'm sure all this will start, and
Yeah.
so I don't. So I wanted to show that there was this mortal, not even an asura, a mortal human being who could overpower him and keep him prisoner. And how, as long as Kartavira Arjuna was around, Ravana could not become Ravana. He had to remain Dasagriva. Not he couldn't become Ravana as long as Kartavira Arjuna was there. And I had to show. It also helped me show Arjuna as such a powerful person, and it plays into him not being so well known because there's an actual curse on him by Rishi Apava, who says that there will be somebody else born with the same name as you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he will be better known than you. So it played in both ways. So I loved writing that part about Ravan actually.
No, and I mean, I think you would have. I'm not sure whether Brahman Puran has this detail or not, but wherever I have read, I have read that Pulatsa Rishi had to come to rescue him, but the whole element of that entire storyline you have added, I have never read before, so it was completely new for me. That and it was joy, I mean, reading it, because you have added that entire angle, and how Parashuram gotten involved in that also
Yeah.
was the like new thing for me. I have never read that kind of storyline before. And then there is another storyline that you have, is a very interesting one. On his journey to Karth Maheshmati, Parashuram encounters a settlement with different sects, or your cults, if you can call them, who were residing there. And it came across that you were probably drawing inspiration from what is happening around us these days, the modern world. So maybe
Yeah.
if you can talk a little bit about that, and I would not want to reveal too much about that. You choose how much you want to reveal to the audience here.
Okay. Uh, See, I don't know if this is the message I've been exposed to much, because to me, when I look at our, I dare say, our new age gurus, or people who are talking to us, I'm not talking about the traditional sampradayas, uh, people who wax eloquent about Dharma and Hinduism always seem to put, ahimsa as some kind of a ideal that you should always attain and adhere to, no matter what the situation is. There is context for everything. To me, it seems that you are preaching to the choir. You're taking an already tolerant people and telling them to continue being tolerant even when intolerance is right at their doorstep.
Correct.
And if you are telling them meditate and nothing is going to go wrong, uh, when when somebody chops off your head, literally what is happening nowadays, and you're in meditation, you're not going to know, but what happens to your family and your community. So somehow there is this idea that ahimsa and himsa are polar opposites, and I think they complement each other. If
Correct.
you're if you have a civilization to protect, if you think it is worthy of protection, you need to have Hinsa guard the borders, be there to repel attacks against it. And you need the ahimsa to build the civilization up. They go hand in hand. So looking at Hinsa as a very bad thing and it is only barbarians and depraved people who do this is not correct. And there is this image of Bhagwan Parshuram as a very angry avatar. How does only an angry avatar, I mean, a personality that has only anger in him, have a Vedic hymn attributed to a Parshuram? How does he become a disciple of an Avaduta? Kartavirarjuna and Parshurama both are disciples of Guru Dattatreya.
Correct.
Then how does he start off on Sri Vidya Sadhana? So there has to be more to this. So playing on that image of being angry, I wanted to show that anger had its uses. And there are times where you should be angry. You cannot be sitting there and saying, you know, it's calm. And Bhagwan Parshuram is an avatar that will tell you, you know, this is the line, you don't cross it. You know, you cross it and you're going to face the consequences. He'll most probably tell you 10 steps back. You know, he's going to put up the red flags, he's going to draw the lines for you, and you have to follow it. Otherwise, you're going to face his anger. So there is ahimsa and himsa in the avatar itself. And what better way to portray it and bring the message to people, so situated in what is happening around us today. If more than the cults, in my mind, it is our own people who don't see the danger, who are still sitting on the fence, who are still the same Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam that we are chanting, are equally a danger as well as the cults. So I leave it there. You can read the book to know what it's about.
No, so that is an interesting chapter, basically. That one chapter I felt where you have drawn heavily from the modern world around you. Rather than, I mean, the rest of the book is obviously very Puranic, and the legends from the ancients feature heavily in all those chapters. But this one chapter felt that you have drawn from the modern world and tried to send a message to your reader. And now we know where that message comes from. And if you look at it, this is not only Parashuram. This is like even Bhagwan Ram said, Vinay na manat jaladi jad gaye 3 din beet. बोले राम सकोप तब भय बिन होए न प्रीत, राइट? जब 3 दिन से बैठे हुए हैं कि भाई रास्ता दे दो और रास्ता नहीं दे रहे हैं, तो फिर धनुष उठाना पड़ा, राइट? श्री कृष्ण टेल्स अर्जुन दैट यू हैव टू पिक अप वेपन्स, राइट? अहिंसा परमो धर्मा अगर होता तो वो वेपन उठाने को क्यों बोल रहे हैं? एंड contrary to the image of Parashuram, in Mahabharata, Parashuram plays the role of peace messenger also.
Yes.
Correct. So not many people connect these things, but they are all out there. That is why writing a book and collating that story at one place is important. Because everybody believes Parashuram was angry, मतलब किसी पे भी गुस्सा हो गया, फरसा निकाल दिया, और रामचंद्र जी पे गुस्सा हो गए, भीष्म पितामह पे गुस्सा हो गए, गुस्सा ही होते रहते हैं, राइट? मतलब हमारे यहाँ पे रामलीला में परशुरामी वाला जो एपिसोड होता था, उसमें होता था परशुरामी होगी आज, और सब लोग वो देखने जाते थे कि बहुत बढ़िया एपिसोड होता है वो, जो the guy who used to play Parashuram was a good actor. तो that episode was used to be very favorite episode of ours, जो लक्ष्मण और परशुराम का संवाद होता है ना. तो वो angry image has carried forward, but the same Parashuram goes to the Hastinapur court and tries to convince Duryodhan to avoid the war. He is the one who tells the story of Dambodhva and tells the Mahima of Nar and Narayan. Because जब Dambodhva कुछ नहीं कर पाया तो तुम क्या कर लोगे, right? He goes and explains Arjun's qualities, and by the way, there is another Arjun connection. एक अर्जुन को उधर मारा था, और यहाँ पे वो अर्जुन के क्वालिटीज गिना रहे थे कि देखो ये this weapon. Correct. So it's all connected. I mean, it's very beautifully connected if you read all these texts. But the point is कि बहुत सारा text है, और सारा सब कुछ पढ़ने के बाद कई बार क्या होता है, unless you read it 2-3 times, you sometimes miss these nuances. And this point, like अहिंसा, एक टाइम पे वो अहिंसा भी कर रहे हैं कि सलाह दे रहे हैं, और दूसरे टाइम पे वो हिंसा भी कर रहे हैं, खुद कर रहे हैं, राइट? और आई मीन to an extent, the Kartavirya episode is more like a revenge story, right?
Yeah.
Kartavirya did something personal to him. It didn't come across like even Ramayana. It's a very personal thing. रावण को उन्होंने जबरदस्ती जाके कि नहीं रावण बुरा आदमी है, मैं पैदा हुआ मैं जाके मार दूंगा. Ravan had to come and do something personal to him, give him a reason, and then Sri Ram went and did it. So likewise, Kartavirya here did something very personal to him, tried to take the cow and tried to hurt his father, killed his father, right? I think killed, yes. So basically, all this was done to him, and that gave him a reason to be angry. And who would not be angry with this?
Exactly.
Correct. And one more point I keep making to this guy. Sometimes people say कि राक्षस बुरे हैं अच्छे हैं कैसे पता लगे, असुर बुरे हैं अच्छे हैं कैसे पता लगे, देव और दैत्य में क्या डिफरेंस है. मैंने कहा most of the places, if you read our पौराणिक literature, you would see that the divine जिसको हम बोलते हैं, they are never the aggressor.
Exactly.
But when somebody makes an aggressive attempt at them, then they respond, and then they respond with all their might. And most of the Parashuram story is slightly different than others, but if you look at it, Sri Ram Avatar and Krishna Avatar, they had a whole ecosystem supporting them.
Yeah.
Right? All the Vanar were like avatars of gods or sons of gods. Likewise, in Mahabharata, we have Pandavas and all the other, like Agni se Dashtadumna hai, Satyaki. All these were avatars of somebody or the other, right?
Yeah.
So you need a team to do a lot of do all these tasks. In case of Parashuram's story, that is not the case. And do you have some thoughts on that? Why so? And I mean, this is a very clear difference that I could point out between these.
Yeah, short answer and long answer. Short answer, please read part 2.
Okay.
Long answer is that there are a lot more stories that happen in Lord Parshurama's life. There is a little bit of an ecosystem and a support that comes. Rather than them supporting him, it is, I mentioned his people in book 1. So they have a part to play in part 2.
I mentioned that to you, I think, when I read that book. And you said that you have to wait for part 2.
Yeah. So they do have a part. And if you have heard of Chitpavan Brahmins, there is a story that connects it to Bhagwan Parshuram too. So all that will come in part 2. So there is an ecosystem that he builds before he stops his aggression and donates the earth to Maharishi Kashyapa. Yeah.
So there is one more thing that so while you have built up a lot of things and a lot of you have filled a lot of gaps which are there in the overall storyline, because हम लोग को जो है broad story पता है, but बीच के जो missing pieces हैं वो आपने fill किए. लेकिन there is one thing that I found missing, which is there but I couldn't find in your book, and I want to know if it is a deliberate thing or you have thought about this. That after the act, the killing his mother, the whole Parashuram Kund legend, right? He goes around washing the blood from his axe, and then he finally lands in Arunachal where the blood is finally washed away. So that is the part that I couldn't see in your book. Maybe I mean, if you are holding it for next part, please let us know.
Yeah. So it does come in part 2. The thing is, we are told in the Purana itself that the axe drinks the blood. It doesn't drip off the axe, which is why that verse comes in the book. There are 2-3 legends connecting Bhagwan Parshuram to Renukamba. There's one more story that's, I think, in Uttarakhand, where on a particular Ekadashi, they actually carry Lord Parshuram on a palanquin down to a lake where there is a temple of Renuka Devi. So I've tried to connect that in part 2 of the story. So there is this thing. And not just that, there is a connection of Parshuramaji's axe with Kurukshetra also. There is an earlier name to it. Samanta Panchaka is the name.
Correct.
Yeah. So that too comes in part 2 of the story. So I've
So
kept it for later.
so it is going to be a two-part or a trilogy?
No, it's two parts
Okay.
because there's enough story for maybe 3 or 4 parts to it, but you have to stop it somewhere. He's a Chiranjeevi, so the stories continue.
So you can maybe write a futuristic one also, where Parashuram is living in today's world and he is doing things,
Yeah, I think some
Eternals
books have
kind of.
already come out.
Okay. I think one I have read on Ashwatthama. I am not sure about Parashuram.
Okay.
But yeah, people are writing about Ashwatthama and the legend that he is still around. And
Huh.
I think there is a movie also being, the movie news keeps coming every few months, but kuch action ho
Yeah.
raha hai ki nahi. But a couple of months back, I saw a news that Vicky Kaushal was considered for the lead role in the movie. So they are making a movie on Ashwatthama,
I see. Okay.
a sci-fi setup in future.
Okay.
Uh, I don't know. Maybe this Prabhas's movie
Yeah.
would bring out these characters or not. I don't know because they are saying that it is set up on the Legend of Kalki.
Kalki. Yeah.
But when I saw the trailer, it looks like that they have copied Dune, and
Yeah.
Dune is a
Yeah.
very good sci-fi,
True.
which actually it feels like it is around about Kalki Avatar when you read it, right? There
Yeah.
is also the chosen one, the God King,
True.
and all those things
True.
come up there. So I don't know, Malab, but yes, there is a good material available to write sci-fis also, maybe
Yeah.
in future. And the thing is that if you are writing something imaginary, but you are and based on some character that has already existed and is there is literature available about that character, it
Yeah.
helps that the person writing that knows the character. So if
Yes.
somebody ever writes that book, I would prefer it to be you than anybody else. So let's
Thank you
see
so
how the
much.
part two goes, and
Yeah.
then maybe we can think about the rest of the stuff.
Yeah.
There is a question that has come from Deepak,
Okay.
and we know Deepak. Let's take that for the. If you had to write a novel on any other legendary character from Puranas,
Huh.
which one would you choose?
Okay. I really haven't given it much thought right now because I'm just trying to finish part two. Uh, Other than the most popular characters that we write on from either the Mahabharata or Ramayana, uh, one very fascinating character that I'm not sure how to approach the story so far. I have a broad idea only. I haven't put it down to paper or plotted or anything. Is Raja Harishchandra. It's played as a tragedy in India most of the time. The films also I've seen, it's a whole lot of vilap on what has happened to
Hmm.
him. Uh, I don't. I can see it in another way. I can. So I have not yet tried to flesh it out. So if I ever can, if I think I can do justice to Raja Harishchandra's story, then I will attempt that.
I have a suggestion. I mean, if I can,
Hmm.
you can actually pick up another relative of Parashuram, very fascinating character,
He is.
Vishwamitra.
Wish.
I mean, a very interesting character, and you can actually draw a lot of meaning from the life of Vishwamitra, right? So
Hmm.
he goes through a very a journey where he starts off very angry, right? And he
Hmm.
then keeps doing things that he shouldn't be doing. He keeps doing penance, then he loses out the power of the penance because he does something in his anger. And very fascinating, like Menka episode, then Ramba episode, all these things keep happening. So that can be a very long the series. I mean, that the fascinating life that Vishwamitra has had,
Hmm.
and it could be a good connection to your current work also.
uh, um, uh, Vishwamitra does make an appearance in part two of the.
Okay.
So I will keep this in mind. Uh, if I continue on this way, then I'll have to write. I'll be writing all about the Bhargavas and associated people with that. Let's see. I mean, I seriously haven't given thought. I just want to finish part two first before I decide on what I can write. I've just noted down 3-4 ideas that I can do, but I won't be sitting on them till I finish this. I have a little bit left to finish, so I just want to do that first.
So there is another question, but I think we have already covered this. So what is your view on retellings on epics, where a lot of fictional elements are used and the original story is drastically changed?
Huh.
So we have already talked about this. That
Yeah.
but you may take a couple of minutes to answer this again.
Yeah, I think the gist of the answer is there. See, I'd read a book in Malayalam a long time back, and it was based on the Mahabharata, and it was a very, realistic portrayal of Mahabharata, and I loved the book at that time. I don't know which version of the Mahabharata the author had read, but the entire story was based, to me as a reader, it seemed to be based on one particular incident where, after the war is over, and Yudhishthira comes to know that Karna was Kunti's son. And he's so disgusted with all that has happened. He says, I do not want to be Samrat. Okay. And let Bhima be king. So it seems after that, in the version that he has read, they talk about the coronation of Yudhishthira after that. So what happened between him saying, I do not want to be Samrat, and his coronation is left unsaid. So that unsaid that, Vedavyasa ji has left has become an inspiration for the writer to fill it in. And the motivation there was that Draupadi approaches Bhima and says, please don't accept. Because if you do accept, then I will not be the Samratni. Your first wife will be. And that is Hidimba.
Yeah.
Okay. So that takes away my ambition to be the empress of Bharatvarsh. So great choice that you have taken. I used to love the story till I, kept reading the Mahabharata. And now when I read back, I'm like, I can't approach that story with the same fascination I had before. So the writer has taken that particular instance and he's talked about it. But to justify his story, what he's done is that he's put a motivation with Draupadi that we don't find in Vedavyasa's Mahabharata at all.
She was the one who chose a Brahmin without any cloths on his body as her husband, right?
Yes.
If she had that ambition, she would have refused to marry Arjuna during her Swayamvar itself.
Yeah.
At that point in time, they were beggars, literally.
True. So the idea, the germ of the idea that he had was superb. But to justify his story, what has happened is that you have compromised with Draupadi's character. So you can't have a sudden change of heart at that moment. So you have to build up, show her continuously as this character throughout the book. What happens? And the sad part is I see so-called feminists write about Draupadi this way. See, visually it makes for a great spectacle, saying that Bhima took Dushasan's blood and went and
Yes, correct.
Yeah, but it's practically not possible during the war. So
time out.
Yeah. So when with all the wisdom and knowledge of writing one book, I would just request people when they're rewriting this to, it's as important what you leave out of the story as what you include. So certain things, no matter how dramatic and fascinating it may sound, have to be is best kept outside. I don't know what else to say.
This reminds me of a incident. Somebody I follow on Twitter, he claims to have read a lot of versions of Mahabharata, and the person was writing a thread on Mahabharata. And then came the point about Shakuni. And then this guy read कि भाई शकुनी के साथ ऐसा हुआ, and he was taking revenge and all that. So then I replied to him कि boss, in Mahabharata, Shakuni's brothers and sons and all of them fight in the Kurukshetra war, and then they die there. There are descriptions of how they die, who killed them.
Yeah.
So how this story doesn't make sense. So he said, no, there are various versions, various things, and you can refer to. मैंने कहा, then how do you maintain consistency?
Yeah.
करेक्ट राइट कि
Right.
आपने अपनी कहानी में बता दिया कि शकुनी ने ये किया, फिर किसी ने पढ़ा कि उसके भाई तो यहाँ लड़ रहे हैं. सो
हाँ.
यू हैव टू बेसिकली स्टिक टू वन कि भाई
Yeah.
दिस इज द वन व्हिच इज देयर. बाकी फैसिनेटेड, बाकी आर ऑल फैसिनेटिंग रीड्स. You can read them, you can enjoy them as a piece of novel or as a piece of literature entertainment, but when it comes to finding value in it, going beyond the entertainment factor, then you have to
Yes.
settle for one source.
Yeah.
And that is the source we know, right?
Yeah.
The version that Vedavyas has written. I mean, and many people keep coming back with argument ki, do you have that version which Ganesha wrote? And I tell them that even you don't have that.
Yeah.
Correct.
Correct.
So whatever counter you are making is based on what?
Yeah.
Correct. So there, in a chronological order, some text came, and then obviously there were variations. But
Yeah.
then Bori Institute did the good job of studying most of them and come up with a version. So
Yeah.
when it comes to a debate or when it comes to a discussion, you would refer to that version.
Yeah.
Why you have to get into the argument कि नहीं आप राजगोपालाचारी की किताब का स्क्रीनशॉट लेके आइए? अरे भाई, राजगोपालाचारी came much after. His inspiration was also the same book.
Yeah.
Right? Ramdhari Singh
Yeah.
Dinkar wrote Rashmirathi. His inspiration would have also been the similar sources, right? You can't say
Right.
just because Ramdhari Singh Dinkar wrote it, that becomes a core word on it than Vedavyasa's word.
Yeah.
Correct? So
Absolutely.
no matter how great an author Ramdhari Singh Dinkar was, no matter how great a poet he was, but when it comes to choosing his words over Vedavyasa, I would always choose Vedavyasa's word. Correct? And most of the time, it's the good work that creates more myths, right? If somebody does a really good job with the reproduction,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in that reproduction you include myths, because the overall work is so good, you can't imagine that this is a myth, right? You start believing it. And
Yeah.
that is why, like Michael Madhusudan Dutt is writing Meghnadvat and glorifying
Yes.
Meghnad. That is because he is a great author. He wrote a good book.
Yeah.
I mean, all credit to him, right? Mrityunjay is a good book, but it's a good novel. You read, somebody was saying, नहीं आप मृत्युंजय पढ़िए, तो I posted a book, front page of मृत्युंजय जिसमें ऊपर उपन्यास लिखा हुआ है बड़ा बड़ा. So I said, even Shivaji Sawant is calling it an upanyas. So please don't refer to an upanyas in a scholarly debate. Debate should be always based on the subject matter which is in front of us as accepted as an authentic source.
True.
I mean, गणेश जी का लिखा तो ना मेरे पास है ना तुम्हारे पास है.
हाँ.
If you are saying कि नहीं तुमने नहीं देखा, तो क्या तुमने देखा? तुमने भी नहीं देखा.
Correct.
So you are coming up with imagination. But since we are on this topic, let me deviate a little bit from the book. We have talked a lot about Rama of the Axe. People should go and read the book. It is available on Padhega India. It is available on Amazon and all the other bookstores. We will put in the links of Padhega India on our description also. You can click there and buy the book. I have read it and it's a fascinating book. Now, slight deviation. When people, so basically, when you Mahabharat and Ramayana, many times people ask me this question that did these events really happen? And you have read so much. How do you claim that these events happened or not happened for that matter? And what is your stand on it? And how does it affect you?
Okay. I think anybody who's read my book would know that I approach it with a tremendous amount of bhakti. I don't approach the book or the story as a skeptic. My understanding of my main protagonist comes from my bhakti to him. I do not believe these things are false. They should have occurred. Now you will ask me, where are the Divyastras? We don't know. We don't see any evidence of it. For argument's sake, let me say it was poetic exaggeration. But do not discount the quality of the people who have told us the story. Even today, so many thousands of years later, we are still discovering meanings to what Vedavyasaji wrote. So if they put in that poetic exaggeration, as you want to call it, there has to be a reason for it. As a reader, trying to understand that is my responsibility. it becomes even more of a responsibility when I'm a writer. Why did he say this? Why did Mahadeva give Parashurama a axe? Now he knew the other Divyastras. Why would an axe be given? He's not given it to anybody else. It's so well known with Ramabhadra that his name itself is now, we know him as Parashuram.
Parashuram, yeah.
There should be a reason to it. What would be the reason? Now you don't have an answer to it. If you are trying to formulate something there, you have to keep the context in mind. You're not compromising on your character anywhere. So whether you approach a text like this, the Ramayana, I don't have proof that it happened. There are different dates being postulated by people. And if you actually look at archaeology and history, they're saying that's the Bronze Age and all that. Where are people going to have these rathas? Where are they going to have all these bows and arrows and all that stuff? I said, before you come to a firm conclusion, you don't have the proof either which way.
No, but recently
the text is there.
They discovered these bows and rathas, in archaeological survey of Saraigadi, I think.
Yeah. So whichever way you think at it, there is a reason this text is given to you. What can you draw out of it? It's not a mere retelling of a person. It is also teaching you something. It is also giving you the geography of the travel. There is so much to learn from this. You are restricting your view, your taking from the book by saying, is it true or not? This rule is not applied to other scriptures that are non-Indian. I don't see you do that. Nobody goes around asking, did he really walk on water? You don't dare do that. So when you have a certain reluctance to say that there, I'm not saying use the reluctance here. I'm saying just, keep it aside for a moment, approach the story and see what you can learn from it. I wouldn't have written Rama of the Axe. I mean, you may not like the story. You may say this is, I have done injustice to Bhagavan Parshuram. But I did not approach it from a skeptic's point of view. I approached it with bhakti. You don't need to have that bhakti to write the story, but I need you to have a fair view of the character. Otherwise, it's not going to appeal to the reader. You're going to distort the character and you're going to get a completely warped view of who Bhagavan Parshuram was. And that is the line I'm not willing to cross. To me, it is completely superfluous whether the reader believes Ramayana really happened or not. My job as a writer is to make him believe that this must have happened this way.
So basically, when I am asked this question, and I am often asked this question, my answer usually is that it doesn't matter to me. My belief in Sri Ram or my belief in Sri Krishna is not from the fact whether he existed in real life or not. It is from basically my understanding of Sri Ram comes from Valmiki Ramayana, and the person he has written in that book is God.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So that is my source of inspiration, right? Yeah. And that is the source of everybody's inspiration, whoever believes in Sri Ram. Now, whether he was there, Valmiki ne unko dekha ki nahi dekha, अरे देखा नहीं देखा, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
लिखा, वो हमारे पास है, right? So I usually avoid getting into this debate. And that one point you made that you are not approaching it as a skeptic, and that is what happens when a skeptic approaches this story and tries to write it. They come with a lot of rationalizations.
Yeah.
Right, which is a very easy way to identify who has approached it as a skeptic and who has approached it with a belief. Yeah. And if you look at many of these books, they try to justify these events, some of these divinity events, with okay, maybe this is a metaphor. Maybe Nahush was not a Ajgar. Maybe he was a king of a Naga tribe. Right, you can come up with these kind of justifications to justify कि एक सांप से कैसे बात कर ली भाई, ऐसा तो हो ही नहीं सकता. Correct. So when you can't believe it, then you try to justify it. Maybe सांप नहीं था, जैसे लोग बोलते हैं कि भाई वानर नहीं, वो वन में रहने वाले नर थे. हाँ. अरे उनकी टेल डिस्क्राइब करी गई है, राइट? हनुमान जी ने पूंछ से आग लगाई थी. तो the point is कि when you are skeptic about it, or when you basically don't believe in yourself, then you start coming up with the justification. एक थोड़े आपके अंदर एक inferiority आ जाती है. unnecessary, which should not be the case. But then you start coming up with rationalizations, and that is something which I don't see in your book. Actually, that is in your book you are actually gone out of your way to bring in divine even more, even more than what is actually present in Parashuram's story, right?
Yeah.
And that comes across the bhakti angle that you talked about. And when you write with bhakti, you become immortal, right? Tulsidas ji wrote Sri Ramcharitmanas, and I talk to people and I tell them that if you want to influence a small coterie of people, you talk like Ashtavakra, like very difficult language and difficult to understand. Ashtavakra will influence Janak, but Tulsidas influences the civilization. That is the difference, right? So
That's very well said.
कि भक्ति में आप जो है आप नॉर्मल जो आदमी फील करता है आप वैसा फील कर रहे हो. You are able to connect to the expression. But when an Ashtavakra talks about that, then you have to have a certain level of scholarship within yourself to even understand what he's saying. So a common person cannot understand Ashtavakra, but a common person can understand Tulsidas. And that is where the difference lies, that कि भाई एक scholarship होती है और फिर एक भक्ति होती है, and भक्ति के लिए scholarship नहीं लगती है. So one more last question. So, and again it is about Mahabharata, because I am basically seeking your help in answering the questions which are often asked to me.
Okay.
And one of the question is that Mahabharata is written from the point of view of the victor. And I tell them recently this post that became viral, this I think Palki Sharma was saying उन्होंने narrative setup किया, उन्होंने ये किया. I don't know, have you seen that video?
I did see it.
तो उसमें वो बोलते ना कि see they control the narrative. मैंने कहा how do you control the narrative, because the book is written by Vedavyas.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, had Yudhishthir commissioned a history book later on, and then in that book he has written something differently, then I can understand the point that he controlled the narrative. Like Churchill wrote the book, and everybody sees Churchill's role in World War II based on Churchill's own book, so he wouldn't criticize himself, right? But that's not what happened in Mahabharata. So how do you answer that?
No. So if this was just narrative and some kind of a propaganda campaign for the Pandavas that were happening, which propagandist would put up the dice story of Yudhishthir, staking his brothers and his wife? How would the greatest warrior of the Mahabharata, of probably one of the greatest warriors of all time, spend a year as a eunuch? Would there be anything more humiliating for a man at that time? How did this get into propaganda? I mean, these are questions.
Why would you keep the way Dronacharya was killed if it was propaganda?
Yeah, if it was propaganda. If this was just controlling the narrative, everything would be a clean slate. Now, if you're going to go one step ahead and say, they were very clever with this, they also put in a little bit of, mistakes that these people did. Yeah. If that was the case, how many other things could they have added to this? It's I mean, that comes from a wrong approach to understanding this, because this has probably because of the the films and the TV serials that have impacted people. Can you believe the amount of damage? We were talking about the books that were written very well, but do not agree with what Vedavyasa ji has written. Look at the amount of damage one line of dialogue has done. Andeka Putra Andha. How much has it damaged Draupadi's character? And just because of that one line, how many justifications are given to all the evil done by the Kauravas because of that? It all comes back to that one line. So the narrative being peddled, unfortunately, to correct Palki Sharma ji, is not what she thinks is it, but it's the modern myth making that says that that is the narrative that is being run.
Exactly. So the very fact that you are saying this is setting up the narrative. You are now trying to set up the narrative. They did not set up the narrative. They did not control the narrative. By making statements like this, what you do, you make us question Mahabharata, right? यार क्या बात है, सही है, गलत है, क्या मतलब those questions start creeping into your mind. And
Yeah.
Mahabharata and Ramayana are the foundation stone of our culture.
Yes.
Right? If you want to destroy our culture, you need to question Ramayana and Mahabharata. Right? If we stop believing in Sri Ram, if we stop believing in Sri Krishna, then what are we?
Yeah.
So if you want to strike at the very core of our existence, you need to question these epics, and these kind of statements actually do that.
Yeah.
They make a common person question these things. कि यार नहीं सही बात है यार, ये जीते थे तो जनरली तो ऐसे ही होता है. विक्टर लाइक जूलियस सीजर ए हीरो डिस्पाइट किलिंग सो मेनी गोल्स. Correct. Alexander is great despite waging so unnecessary war across the world.
True.
So ये तो होता है, and then you start applying that same thing to Mahabharata also, to Ramayana also.
True.
And so this kind of a thought, I mean, this is basically setting up the narrative,
True.
trying to maybe take
Yeah.
control of the narrative, because you know that most of India people don't actually go and read that 10,000 page book. It's like 7,000-8,000 pages. If somebody wants to actually read the entire thing.
Yeah.
And the surprising thing, Ranjit, is that the kind of damage these books have already done is to the extent that when we go and present facts, people question us and say that you are lying. Right? We have seen that happen. That when we present facts, they believe in these lies so much that despite we producing evidence, they say no, that evidence is wrong. Gita Press Gorakhpur ने गलत लिख दिया होगा, तो आप सही लेके आइए ना. So the burden of producing evidence is on the person who is telling the truth.
Yeah.
Correct. So that is really the bad situation, and that is why I encourage the authors like you who are actually producing work which is central into the facts that are presented in our Puranic literature and our itihasas. And that is important, that to keep doing more, producing more and more such work to counter this narrative.
Yeah.
Because if somebody has read Mrityunjay and that has affected him so much, why is not there a counter of Mrityunjay? There should be 10 counters of Mrityunjay which tell the actual story of Karna. And the moment you read 10 stories who are telling the actual story and Mrityunjay one who is telling the distorted fact, you would know that this is just a fan fiction. But right now the balance is different. Right now the balance is on the other side. The myth makers have a larger share of the larger mind share of our society, while the people who are trying to tell the truth have a very smaller mind share.
Yeah.
Why it is there, I am not getting into that. There are various factors. I am not going to get into the research of why this happened, but this has happened. This is happening.
Yeah.
And now we need to be forward looking to see how we can change that, how we can correct
Correct.
it.
Yeah.
And the only way I see correcting that is to produce more Rama of the Axe than Amrityunjay.
Yeah.
So that is the concluding part that I would leave you guys with. And thank you, Ranjit, for being with us. Next week, we will try to cover the story of Satyaki. So Sunday, 9 p.m. Let's connect again to talk about Satyaki, a very fascinating character from Mahabharata. And when I read Mahabharata, I was surprised to know. I was surprised how this character is nowhere present in the modern retellings. How can such a central character be eliminated? Because Satyaki is not only involved in just a few of the days of the wars, right? Like Bhurishrava, you can eliminate because Bhurishrava doesn't do much beside the war. And in the war, you just need to cover the central events, ki Drona kaise mare and all that. But Satyaki is not only a hero during the war; he is a hero before. He has a big role afterwards also, right? And that character is nowhere to be found. We don't see Satyaki anywhere in our modern retellings. I have seen both the TV serials, which are the popular ones, and Satyaki's character is not there.
Not there.
So let us talk about Satyaki and let's find out why I am so excited about this character. And we will have our scholars who have studied various versions of Mahabharata and various other literature to talk about Satyaki along with me. So let's connect again tomorrow night. Not tomorrow, next Sunday, Sunday night, 9 p.m. Dhanyavad.